All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is 4 o'clock, and I don't want to keep you any longer than you have to. Can you believe it? We are on the 12th. That's right, the 12th. This is the last one of the Blended Learning Mindset series. We've done 6 in blended learning, and this is our 6th one in student learning. And tonight we're going to be talking about the 5E model. I know a lot of you have been in a variety of the courses, and it's so fun that we have this blended learning mindset crew, and it's fun to learn and grow together. So I appreciate you all being here tonight, and I'm kind of sad it's the last one. I'm hoping that we come back and next year that the Department of Education allows us to do some more of those. So my name is Kim Loomis. And I used to be, I love saying that, I used to be the director for online and blended learning down in Clark County School District. And that was in 2019 when I retired, the summer of 2019, which is prior to COVID. So I didn't have to deal with all of the ups and downs that most of you guys have had to deal with. I left prior to that. My goal at that time was really just trying to get people to do blended learning in their classrooms. And 90% of the time I got, we don't have enough, laptops, and I don't want to schedule a lab. It's too hard. So I got to tell you, one of the things that I thank COVID for, not that I'm appreciative that we have it, but what it did do is it put technology in the hands of each and every student. So that's been fun. So a little bit about myself. Again, like I said, I was the director. I was a high school math teacher for 10 years. I was a curriculum coordinator, did high school reform. And I did author a book called Think Outside the Box. So every once in a while, you'll hear me use that quote, think outside the box. Today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about student-centered learning, but we're going to focus a lot on the 5E model of instruction. And then we'll talk about different tools and strategies you can use in those 5E models. And remember, we do have our Canvas extended workshop available to you. It just takes some of the learning that we've done here and really expands on it, and it allows you to think about how you can really take this into your classroom. And during these summer workshops, it's not about implementing it in your classroom and reflecting on the implementation, but it's about designing a unit of study in the model. Last time we did the 4 C's, today we're doing the 5 E's for next year's deployment. So keep that in mind. All right, so let's do a background check. Y'all have annotate. It's usually at the top or the bottom of your screen. Or you can go into chat. Chat works as well. You can give me a 1, 2, or 3. Just doing a background check. Number 1 is, hey, I've created and used the 5E model in my classroom, meaning, woohoo, I'm good. I know I have some really good background knowledge. I'm number 1. Number 2 is, I know what the model is, but I haven't created anything in it lately or at all. And number 3, thank you, Christina Tully, is that I don't even know what it is. And I'm so looking forward to what's going on today. So lots of 2s coming up in chat, a couple of 3s. Good, good. All right, I love it. That gives us a pretty good idea of where we're at today. Good. All right. So what I want to do today is something a little bit different. We are going to kick right off with going into breakout rooms, because you'll notice what I just did was a background check. So I want to know what strategies you are currently using to activate prior knowledge. And if you're using digital tools to do that, are you using a Jamboard? Are you using, something that might help you in that respect? So let's go ahead. Well, welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Hey, please use chat. I know that you guys got an opportunity to talk about some of the strategies you use. One of the first steps in the 5E model is actually to activate prior knowledge. So that's kind of what I was kind of hoping we could talk about it. But what digital tools, if any, are you using? And I notice over here we got Nearpod is one of the ones. Great. I love it. Padlet. Oh, great, Michael. Google Forms. Yeah. It's lots of different ways that we can activate that prior knowledge. Yeah, mini quizzes and Canvas, they work just as well. Yeah. So when we activate that prior knowledge, it's really easy to try to get something else to stick to it. So if we can get somebody to start thinking about the Nevada, then we can start talking about the different counties in Nevada. Just what do they know about Nevada? If they've only lived in Clark and they don't know that there's all these, 16 other counties, so activating some of those. I like it, the nice and wonder. Yeah, and they can be done on Jamboards, docs, Padlets. There's lots of different ways. Really, guys, we're already talking about the 5 E's, because guess what? That first E is really trying to activate that student's current knowledge. So as we go through today, just think about how do I get my students actively engaged in it? And today we're going to talk a lot about student-centered because that's what the activity is on, and really looking at that one-third, one-third, one-third balance. Those of you that have been with me before have probably heard me say this lots of different times. I'm a former math teacher. There is a formal definition for blended learning if you want to go on the Clay Christensen Blended Learning Universe website, but I make it really easy because like I said, I'm a math teacher. I like things that are really easy. I want to take the wisdom of the teachers because you guys are the heart of the classroom, and that's why I keep that heart there to remind me and you that I never want to take the teacher out of the classroom. I don't care how good the technology gets. It should never leave. The teachers are the heart and soul. They're the relationships that kids come to school for. So we want to keep you teachers in there because you guys have so much wisdom, not only about your content knowledge, but also just wisdom about kids that you work with fifth graders and first graders and high school kids. You have that wisdom that the technology doesn't. But what it does is it has adaptability. It has the ability to create learning spaces for each and individual students. Even if you create a Padlet, it looks like each kid gets their own Padlet and they start putting all their little Post-its on it. But I could also say, you know what, Tommy, you go to board number 6 and Betty, you go to board number 7. I can create an individualized learning space. And if I have adaptability content like Alex Math, which some of you have heard of, it can create a learning path for that student based on their current and past knowledge experiences. So taking those two things, the wisdom of the teacher, the adaptability of technology, so that we can create a personalized learning space for each and every individual student. We can do that with all kinds of different ways. Like today, we're going to really talk about the 5E model, but these 3 icons, the teacher, the technology, and the students, are really the heart of that 1/3. So when you hear me say that 1/3 balance, I'm really saying 1/3 of the time we want to release the learning to technology. And when I say release the learning to technology, I'm releasing content learning. I want something that has math, science, social studies, English, and I want kids to access it other than through me. And that could be with a software product like iReady or iExcel, or it could be with videos that you've either found on YouTube or that you created. But releasing that learning so that kids can do it at their own pace and time in the digital world. 1/3 of the time, we should guide the instruction. There's going to be times where I need to take the kids to a higher order thinking level, or I need to do some stuff that wasn't in the technology that only I can deliver. But 1/3 of the time, we really want to release to our students. And that's where we're going to spend a lot of our time today in the 5E model, because the 5E model is really about releasing to our students. It's about getting our students engaged, having them owning the learning. We get to guide it with a playlist, and it could be a playlist type model, or it could be via the lesson plans that we've created. We get to guide that learning, but then we get to step back and do teaching by walking around, watching the kids and seeing the excitement and those light bulbs go on and posing questions. It's just so much fun when we release to the technology and we release to the kids. 2/3 of the time, we get to do teaching by walking around. And that's when we get to build those strong relationships and really, really get the kids to higher order thinking skills so that we can remediate if we need to and extend when we can. So today, when we're thinking about the 5E model, and we'll get there, I promise. We know that one piece of it is that active knowledge, but what we're really trying to do in that 5E model is try to get to the bottom of this pyramid. And you've probably seen this Edgar Dale's pyramid. It's been around since 1969. The more we get engaged and the more that we can actively get our hands and minds wrapped around content, not just reading it and hearing it and seeing it, but actually participating in discussions, which I saw came up in your guys' chats there, as well as doing some presentations and really doing things and discussing things and creating movies and creating cool things. And the technology allows us to do it. We're more likely to remember it. And if we're more likely to remember it, then we're going to own it. We're going to own the math. We're going to own the science. We're going to own the literacy. We're going to own it if we can really get to the point where we've talked about it, we've engaged in it, we've maybe even created a product via it. So that's where the 5E model comes in, is trying to get those students to those higher percentages of remembering, or like you see here in this pyramid, down towards the bottom. So to do that, what we really need to do is change the way we're thinking. So the 5E model, and you can see it here on the left, starts with engage, explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate. So that's the icons there that kind of get you through the 5Es. But really the background of this is inquiry-based constructivism. We want the kids to construct their knowledge. It's not where we say, oh, we're not going to give you anything to construct. No, 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 no. We're going to guide that construction. We're going to really help them take the learners to take some ownership of their learning, take some of the things that they already know and build upon it. So that's better than that passive just taking in information. It's really for them engaging and getting that discognizance of really understanding, because when we get into a place where we have disequilibrium, then we're really in the learning mode. And that's kind of what the 5E model says. We want students to construct their knowledge. Now, it's a guided construction. So when you're thinking about the 5E model, how can you guide the students to get to the level that you want them to get through? And the first place we do is engage. And then we have them do some exploring. And then we go into explaining. And notice that word explaining. And we'll talk more about it in a moment. That's when we actually, as a teacher, do more direct instruction, not until the third step. And then we get to extend it, or what we call elaborate, and then we evaluate. And the evaluation is both on the teacher's side as well as the student side. So as we go through this, I really want you to kind of open your mind, because we're really kind of changing the way we do things. We're really looking at a student-centered model. We're not looking at the traditional way that we've always done things, where we're the leader or the authority of the classroom and students were passive receivers of information. We're flipping that on its head. You saw in that model, I told you, explain, which is the third step, is when the teachers actually say, let me introduce some of the vocabulary from this unit. And at that point in time, it's like, oh my gosh, the kids have maybe spent 2 days or 30 minutes or 60 minutes, depending on your unit of study, already actively engaged in it. So when you say, we're going to start defining some words, they have some background knowledge to hang those new vocabulary words on. And really what it's going to be doing is helping the students to actively engage and take ownership in that learning. So we step aside and we become facilitators, or what I like to say, lead learners. We're learning with them, beside them. And what we're doing, instead of looking for the correct answers, we're posing questions. We're asking students to learn from errors. We're saying, hey, well, that was just your first learning. That's your first attempt at learning. It wasn't a failure. Let's try it a different way, right? What we're really trying to say is we want this continuous self-assessment from the students so that we can give them ongoing feedback and not waiting till the summative assessment, and not making it a competitive individualistic learning environment, but making it a collaborative supportive environment. So a little bit different, and kind of turn some things on its head as we're thinking about the 5E model and turning it over and releasing to our students. So as we do this, it's a shift, not only for us, but it's a shift for our students. And the more we do this, the more they will grab a hold of it and want it. Believe me, they're going to want to explore. They're going to want to elaborate and extend. They're going to be excited about learning. That should be our 6E there, is excitement, because when they become actively engaged agents and they're making the decisions and they're creating, then they are growing. And at that point in time, they're using the 4 C's, which we learned on that last time: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. They're shifting to that. And what we're doing is we're creating a roadmap. We're creating a guide for them to get there, just using the 5E model to get there. So that's kind of how it's a little bit different, and we're going to shift things a little bit. We want to try to bring in as much technology to help us in that respects, and that could be websites, that can be software products, that can be tools like we just talked about a moment ago, to get them to that area. All right, I've kind of laid the background on the 5E model, so let's get into it. The 5E model really starts with engage, and then explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And it doesn't have to be linear. I'll be honest with you, it can be very circular. I like engage every day. You'll see that in a moment. So let's go ahead and let's get deep into it. So the 5E model, so let me tell you about this. It was actually started by a bunch of elementary science teachers. So in Colorado, a bunch of these elementary science teachers got together in the late 80s and said, we need to find something that's more inquisitive, it's more constructive, where the kids can really be curious and explore and just investigate science. And so taking some of the theories of the time, and there was some really good theories at the time, and they just expanded on it. And they ended up coming up with the 5E model. And there's some great videos out there. Just Google it. And if you look under it, because the biological science curriculum study that did this, the women that talk about it is so funny, because they're just like, they said that we had to have something that was easy to remember, and it all had to start with the same letters. It's really funny. So here they are: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, which I like to call extend, and then evaluate. But it's really guiding students to learn new concepts. It's not giving students new content, but guiding them to it. So let's start with that first, engage. So when we think about it, Roger Beebe, who's the quote that you see over there on the far left, he was the professor at the time in the late 80s that kind of led this group of teachers to put together the 5E model. Now, it's been around, so you got to think, late 80s, we're in the early 20s. It's been around nearly 50 years, right? But it got well beyond science. And what we found when you look at the research, when kids went through these stages, engage, by bringing the interest is generated through relevant context and prior knowledge, right? That's that first step, that engage. And then they go into that explore, and then they get to do hands-on and do some problem solvings and do some research and kind of look things over, and they're out there exploring. And then we bring them back together for explain. And that explain really is saying, what did you find? And we're going to kind of look at those concepts and formally present them at that point in time. That's where that teacher kind of takes a bigger role. It's in direct instruction. I don't want to say you don't have a role in all of this. You have a huge role in all of this, because really what kids are doing is they're working collaboratively with peers to construct and solve problems and carry out investigations. After we get to that explain part, where we might formalize the vocabulary and formalize the concepts, then we want to take those kids to a higher order. That's where elaborate comes in. That's where we take that new knowledge and we apply it to new situations, a lot of real world problems, taking them to a higher level. And then, of course, like we talked about, that evaluate comes in, and that evaluate is not only the learning objects that we wanted the students to learn, but also to have them to reflect on the learning process as well as their peers. And you see here, it's very secular. I can have evaluate after each stage. I can have engage at each stage. Think of them as opening and closing of any classroom. I want to see where we're at. I might even do an elaborate or an extend somewhere along the line. So let's look deeper at all of them, because again, really this process asks students to observe, model, analyze, explain, draw conclusions, argue from evidence, talk about their own understandings, where they are taking ownership of their own learning. And we step back. Remember that 2/3. We step back. We're going to release to the digital content to help them with that DOK level 1 and 2, that low level stuff that we don't have to lecture on right now. We let the technology take care of that. It could be a tutorial that's on Khan Academy. It could be a video I found on YouTube. It could be something that I even created, but I'm letting the kids explore it on their own. All right, so let's start with number one. Number one is engage. This is where we spark curiosity. This is where we activate that curiosity, and we're priming the thinking for the new learning concepts. This is an opportunity for us to figure out what they currently already know. And if we were talking about spiders, I might have a reflective writing. What do you know about spiders? And then also it might help me figure out where there's possible misconceptions, because some people think that spiders are all poisonous, and you and I know that they're not. Right? So what kind of activities can we do in this engage stage? Well, we can demonstrate something. And they're great. They're great for science, to demonstrate something and see this great explanation or this cloud of smoke go up in the air, and the kids are like, "Wow, that's really cool. How'd you make that happen?" Spark curiosity, right? It could be reading something. It could be brainstorming. It could be questioning. And I like quiz trades, my favorite, or you could even like the brainstorming. You can do that info of the topics or carousel brainstorming that you might have seen when we were talking about the EDU protocols. It could be a free write. It could be viewing a video that, is just exciting, and the kids are like, "Wow, how did that happen?" Or it could be a KWL. There's lots of different ways that we want to get the kids tuned in or starting that curiosity or engagement. Now, what does that mean for you and I? Well, for teachers in this phase, we're creating interest. We're generating that curiosity. We're raising questions. We're posing those questions for the students, and we're eliciting responses that uncover what students know and think about the concept. So it's not guided instruction. but it's guided curiosity. Think of it that way, right? So now what are we having our students do during this time? Well, they're asking questions like, wow, how did that happen? What do I already know about this? What can I find out? And if you think about it, it's for them. We could just post a board and say, hey, here's our parking lot. What questions do you have? We just watched this 3-minute video clip. What are you thinking about? So it's creating that interest. And that's that first stage of the 5E process. Now, I told you the second stage. Anybody remember what it was? You can throw it over in chat. First one's engaged. You want to get the kids tuned in. You want to get that curiosity going. The second stage is my absolute favorite. Thank you, Tanya. It's right. It's explore. It's going and finding out. We've sparked the curiosity. Let's not bore them. Let's not do some direct instruction. Let them go out and work together, partner up, pair share, or small groups where they might be a common activity. It could be a playlist that you have them do, or have like 5 different things that they can, pick 3 of. We talked about the must-dos and the may-dos in some previous webinars where we're designing guided instruction, and the kids are out there questioning, and they're conducting experiments, and they're doing research. The kids are doing all the exploring. They're performing the investigations, right? So it could be like that cyber sandwich again from Ed Protocols, or it could be a jigsaw where we take a reading article and all the kids are reading it, but we break it down so that the kids are working together, solving problems. They're constructing their knowledge at this point in time. We're really having them find out new information. We're not giving it to them. We're not just dumping it inside them, but we really want them to go find it out to create that ownership. Now we're guiding them, because we might give them the resources that we suggest that they go to. And that could be in a playlist or in a menu that we can have them go do explorations or finding things out. So what we're going to be doing at this time is we're encouraging the students to work together, right? I know you and I have some kids, and I'm one of them that likes to work alone. Be honest, I don't. I like to work alone because I get things done. And sometimes I just like, right. We live in a society where we all live in families and we're community, right? Me too, right? And so at this point in time, what we need to do is encourage those students to work together, because we are trying to build those 21st century the skills that we are. And the other thing is we want to observe and listen. This is where that 2/3 of teaching by walking around comes in, right? We're walking around, we're listening to what the students are saying. We're asking probing questions. We may have to redirect when necessary. And we're providing students with time to really just puzzle through, right? To let them say, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? We're not directing them. We're just guiding them. So it's a little bit different than that direct instruction that we've done in the past where we had teacher-led classrooms. Now we're using student-centered. So students are thinking freely within the activity. They're exploring, they're researching, and sometimes it could be hands-on. Sometimes it could be minds on. Sometimes it could be digging into technology, but they're examining alternatives and they're discussing with their peers. It might be, I'm going to go to these 2 websites. I want you to go to these 2 websites, and then we'll get together. Cyber sandwich, right? And figure out what they have in common, and recording these new learnings and these new observations and ideas. And really what we want them to do is just sit back and suspend judgment. We don't want them to say, that's stupid, or that's dumb. We want them to bring it all together so that they can really contemplate it and find things out. All right, anybody? Stage 3. Over into the chat. So we've got examine, right? Explain. Explain is the next one. And this is where the teacher starts coming in. This is where there might be more formalized language and formalized learning. This is where we help students construct meaning from their experiences in the engage and the explore phases. This is where knowledge is more formalized. It's clearly articulated. And sometimes that could be by us, by drawing it out with students, saying, what did you find? And then posting it on boards. And we've got different places where we're really thinking through what were the main points. What did you find, right? It could be done being with structured questioning. Like I love World Cafe. If you haven't looked at it, there's some activities inside of the Canvas course that you can go look at. World Cafe, one of my favorites, where you have like this one person who just records everything that the kids have learned. Or it could be teacher explanations and reading and discussing and just really analyzing the stuff that they came through and what does it mean. So like some gallery walk might work, or a Frere method might work, but we're really asking students to compare and classify and do some error analysis at this point in time. They got to go out and do all that exploring. What we're trying to do is formalize it now, formalize the language. This is where the vocabulary would come in. This is where the key concepts would come in, and we'd really formalize those types of things. If we were doing math, it might be the time that I actually say, oh, so how did you find the perimeter? Okay, well, there's a formula that goes through that that'll help you do it. Instead of giving the formula at the beginning, I don't even do it until I tell them, oh, yeah, I want you to go find the perimeter of these different things. And they might use string to do it, or they might use yardsticks to do it. So they were out there figuring these types of things out. And at this stage, this is the stage where we get that formalized language and those recipes and structs. So this is, think about the sorting out that we do in the explain is we're encouraging our students to share with us what they found. And hopefully, and I don't mean hopefully, because if we've done our job right, we've guided them through our playlists or through our, guided instruction, through the lessons that we've done, we've guided them hopefully to get to where we want them to be, but we wanted them to own it, right? So now we're asking them to justify with evidence what they found. And this is also an opportunity for us to kind of just think about, oh, how can we take this a little higher? How can we take this to real world? What does it look like in the real world? And this is where students start explaining their possibilities, and they're listening to other people and they're questioning others' explanations. Guys, that is a skill that so many adults don't even know how to listen to other people, and they don't know how to properly be courteous when they question other people, and listening to explanations and rethinking what they're thinking. So really, we're building these 21st century skills when we ask them to do this. And this might be a great time for them to formally record things into a notebook. Yes, Tanya, I agree. They have a tough time listening. I agree. And that's why the smaller the group, it's a little easier to listen. So those are some of the things. And that's why I like World Cafe, because it's like a small group of people sharing ideas. So think about how that can be done. All right, so we did at the beginning, we said, okay, we explained. So we might, at this point in time, I might say, look, let's come back and let's re-examine something and bring out a parking lot, piece of paper, and just, formalize the things that we've learned. Go back to that explain, and then maybe show another video or do another reading that everybody has engaged in that says, oh my goodness, that's pretty cool. How'd they do that? And it might be a real world example. And that's where our next stage comes in, is that elaborate. Let's take it further. All right, we've kind of figured out how to do perimeter, or we've kind of figured out that spiders they aren't all bad. As a matter of fact, some of them are used for medicinal purposes. And so then we can take our activities to those higher order thinking skills. We can take those activities to a deeper and broader understanding within real world applications, where students can take everything that they've kind of explored and we've now formalized, and now we can take them to comparing and classifying and applying. And if you think of Bloom's taxonomy or Bloom's pyramid, right, we're now getting them to that top part of it, where they're doing some problem solving and making some decisions, and they're doing connections and inquiries. So that's that next level where we're extending the learning. And so again, that's why I like to use the word extend instead of elaborate, but that's okay. Those scientists, they can go on the elaborate, but I'm going to go with extend or go further. So what does that look like for us as teachers, and what does that look like for our students? Well, for us, again, we're trying to get our kids to really think about what they've learned. We want to encourage them to apply the new learning to new higher order thinking. We want them to take the formal definitions and the formal understandings that we just talked about and apply them in real world settings. So we want to ask them, what do you already know and what do you already think? And then formalize that learning for them. So they're going to now take that new learning that we formalized in the explain state and apply it to some real world applications. And they should be recording these things, and they should be checking for understandings among their peers and still asking questions and posing solutions and making decisions, but not as much as like in the explore stage. If you think about it, in the explore stage, they were just trying to discover. Now they've already done the discovery. Now they're like, dude, I discovered all this. How do I apply it in the real world? Where does it take me? That's what this is. This is where we take it further. So step 4 was that elaborate. And our last step, and I know it's called evaluate, but I don't want us to think of it just as evaluate. It's also a time for us to reflect. It's a time for students to assess their own understandings. And I love when they can do some portfolios, or they can do some free writes where they talk about what they've really learned, or even evaluating their group peers. And this is a time for us as teachers to make sure that our guided inquiry really made progress towards the learning outcomes. So think of this as ongoing throughout the process, but this is a time where we're formalizing it. I don't want to grade when they're exploring, and I don't want to really grade when they're practicing. I want to grade after I know that they've solidified, they've owned it, they formalized the language and the understanding. So one way of doing that, of course, is an assessment, a typical knowledge test, right? But you could do it with a performance assessment. You can do it with having them making a product. You can have them write a journal about it. You can have them do portfolios. I love rubrics where they're grading themselves and they're grading their peers, or maybe even it's a rubric that we as a class came up with on how we're going to grade a product that we're going to do there at the end. So what does this look like for us? Well, again, we're observing the students as they apply their new concepts, right? We're asking open-ended questions. We're allowing our students to assess their own learning and the group processes, and assessing not only, the process, but assessing, did they make the learning objectives that we wanted to? So yeah, there's some formalization in the assessments. So the kids are out there answering those open-ended questions, right? They're evaluating their own progress. They're demonstrating their understanding. They may even ask questions about further investigations. Wouldn't it be exciting if some kid got so excited about spiders or perimeter in math that they're like, dude, I'm going to go try this out. What's the perimeter of this soccer field? What's the perimeter of this soccer field? How come soccer fields come in different shapes and sizes? And they do. So now they're like, I got to figure out why. Why do they come in different shapes and sizes? So this is where our evaluate system comes in. Now, inside your Canvas course, what I did is I created a small one-page document that kind of outlines everything that we talked about a little bit. I don't say everything, but a little bit about the 5 stages, and also provided you an example of one in just a 5-stage process: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. There's other examples and lots of other different places that you're going to be able to see this inside the Canvas course, but I wanted you to know that these were there. Now, remember at the beginning, I told you that it doesn't have to be linear, right? The key things about this is that each phase builds upon students' understanding. And the key here is not to omit any phase. Don't say, oh, we ran out of time, so we're not going to do elaborate. No, that elaborate becomes really important. That's where we get them to the higher order thinking skills, or don't say, oh, we don't have time to explore, we're going to go right to explain. No, because you'll notice here the second bullet says that phases can be repeated or they could be looped. It might be that we'll do a little bit of explanation or let them do a little bit of exploring. Then we come and do a little bit of explaining, formalizing that learning, and then we might go back and have them do some more exploring and then formalizing. We can loop that. We can create a loop and repeat those phases. Like me, I like to do the examine phase, or which is the prior knowledge stuff, every day. I would want to do that every day. What are you learning? Because their knowledge yesterday looks different than the knowledge that they gained today. So I like getting that. What'd you learn? Where'd that come from, right? But also you want to think about building on those opportunities to personalize the learning, right? So when can you release the learning to those students so that students are at different places at different times, and they're really focused in on what excites them? So they get to choose, oh, if we're talking about spiders, I want to talk about tarantulas and black widows. Yes, they're poisonous, but my partner over there might be looking at the water spiders and some of the water bugs that aren't poisonous, right? And the best use of this is a sequence of lessons over time. It's not designed to do it in one day. Now, if you have a 3-hour block period, maybe, but ideally you want to do it over time because you want the kids to really have that opportunity to formalize that language and think about things over time. So as you're thinking through this, think how that might look. So here's one that, as you guys design your units of study, here's one that goes over multiple days. Imagine this is Monday through Friday. Notice that each of those days start off with a gauge. That first day, I'm going to spark curiosity. And I'm going to let those kids go and do some exploration where I'm posing questions. They're out there seeking answers and they're trying to formulate their ideas. And maybe at the end of that day, I might just have an evaluation. Notice, even though evaluation is not really it's the 5th C. I'm going to throw it in right now because I want to do a quick knowledge check. I want to see where my kids are at so that tomorrow I can do another engage and say, hey, what are some of the conjectures you guys are coming up with when you're in your explore stage? And we can, start going through those. and doing some more explanations. Oh, this group over here found this. Did anybody else find that? Now what we're doing is really trying to engage and spark that curiosity and put them out, and again, have them do some more exploration and some group work and revise their ideas. And maybe at the end of that day, I might do a 5-question little quick check just to check their progress. Where are they? Have they formalized their ideas? What are the 3 main key points that they've come up with? Those types of things. So you'll notice that day 3, same thing. I'm going to start with an engage. What big ideas have we come up with? And put those on the board and say, okay. And then that's when we can get into the explanation. We can really formalize the vocabulary and the concepts and the skills. And maybe I might have another 5-question quiz, or maybe I might do Kahoots that day, but I'm doing some type of evaluation. So for me as a teacher, I'm getting data back to know if the kids are on progress for day 5 in this particular multi-day activities, to be able to have that summative assessment. And I know that they're going to be successful in that summative assessment. If I don't do those evaluations on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, on days 1, 2, and 3, and not formally, but maybe informally, to be able to understand what I need to do to the next day, Thursday, engage. How can I take them further? How can I formalize some of those ideas? How can I take them to broader and deeper activities, real world, extending that activities, and being able to do that? I might take them back into Explore. I might say, hey, why don't you go see what they do about this mathematics in the construction field? I want you to go look and see how they do the same mathematics maybe over here in the accounting field. So I broke up my groups. I let them go out and explore some more. And then at the end on Friday, that 5th day, maybe again, I'm going to start off with an engage, because I always want to know what prior knowledge are they bringing in that day, and how can I spark their curiosity? What have we learned? And then we can go into that formal evaluation where they're evaluating themselves. We're evaluating if they met the progress targets that we wanted them to meet. They're evaluating their team and their teamwork. So those, again, building in these SEL skills. So you can see that it's a cycle of events over time that has guided instruction. And if we go back to the previous slide, you'll notice under this example here, that almost looks like a playlist, right? Engage, explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate. And so as we go through these, they could look like a playlist. It could look like a playlist. It could look like a menu. It could look like a lot of stuff that we've already done in the 11 other webinars that we've had this year. All right, we're going to do I've done enough talking. We're going to have you guys do some talking. How can digital resources help your students? Pose questions, which is part of the 5E process, assess knowledge, which we want them to do. They want them to be critical thinkers. And how do they construct new knowledge? Welcome back, everybody. Awesome. I hope you had some time to chat. New friends. So if you've got something that came up really cool in your breakout room, please throw it up in chat with how the digital resources can help your students to pose questions, self-assess, and construct new knowledge. I've given you a lot as we went through today, but let's talk about some of the tools and strategies. Hopefully you came up with more in your groups. And I noticed, guys, we've talked about, Google Forms, Jamboards, polls. I love it. So getting the 5E model is really thinking about how Khan Academy, how we can get different tools and strategies in to help us guide this instruction, right? It's guided inquiry. You don't want to just say, go find something and learn on your own. We really want to guide that. So you heard me talk about playlists. Playlist is a great way a menu is a great way to CK12, great place to find some content. Love it. So as we're going through and you guys are designing your units of studies, I really want you to think about what's the big ideas and the skills, that desired results that you want. We don't want to go to the activities just yet, but then we want to think about, okay, backwards design says, well, what's the culminating assessment we want? Here's the big idea. Well, what do we want is a culminating assessment? And we already know in the examine stage, we want them to be able to produce a product, be able to show mastery. We know what those are, but we want to make sure what's acceptable evidence. Yes, maybe a test would be acceptable evidence, but can we go beyond that? Could it be a product? Could it be a portfolio? Could it be, what could it be? So thinking through what's acceptable. Then we want to plan the experiences. We want to guide that instruction, right? We're going to take ourselves off the stage and really focus in on that 2/3 of students taking the ownership and the technology helping us to get there, right? If you think about the 5-stage, our guided instruction outside of the way we do the lesson planning is really just one of those 5 stages. So a lot of it is us doing teaching by walking around, but that means there's a lot of planning on the back end in our events to figure out what are the learning events we want them to do. So basic steps of inquiry, guys, make sure we have some open-ended questions, trying to spark that curiosity and having the students go out and do the research and the discovery. And again, this can be guided with playlists or worksheets even. And then we want to share what they've learned. We want to formalize that, have them apply it to new situations, and then reflect on that process. So again, think through what are those acceptable ways of doing it and what tools. Like, do we want to use Kahoots? Do we want to use Padlet? Those things that we were talking about at the beginning. And I noticed here at the end, we have a lot of content like CK12 and Khan Academy where we can release the learning to. If you think about in our Canvas course, and if you've been with me for a while, you've seen this, it's still there because some of us are new, but you might want to use Flippity. You might want to use WeVideo. There's some new tools you might want to try out. Also, there's lots of different content in there that you can use as you're thinking through your 5E model of instruction and what's that going to look like for you. So when you think about it, small groups, of course, is one place that I want to go because we want the kids to go back to our 4Cs, communicate, collaborate, creative thinking. We want them to get there. Hopefully when we get to the evaluation, we want them to create something. So think about how we can get small groups together. And of course, this is a great opportunity for us to get those 21st century skills where they can self-manage, where they can learn how to communicate and collaborate with people that have different ideas. And also, when you get into the Canvas course, guys, if you know Dr. Catlin Tucker, she's got a cool little playlist that you can use, and that's that one that's very colorful over there on the far right. She also put together a little trips and tips type thing that even has videos for each of the stages. And again, this can be found inside the Canvas course. So this is just some tips for designing your online experience for the 5E model. It's there in the classroom. So again, this is a summer class. So I want you to explore that 5E model of instruction. I want you to reflect on this new pedagogy and how you can put this into your classroom for next year. So there's not that collecting artifacts because there's no kids around to collect artifacts. So what you're going to be doing is creating or remixing a unit of instruction that you already have done or something new that you've always wanted to do, but in the 5E model. So it'll look a little bit different than what we've done in the past. So again, it is a unit of instruction, meaning that it'll be multi-days, probably multi-task. So the workshop is learn, grow, show like you've seen in the past. This is learning a little bit. You'll have a page on learning a little bit, growing it in your classroom. And then the show assignment is that reflection on what you want.